Your soulmate saying, "Please read this before you fall asleep. I can't lose you twice. My beloved child, stop for one quiet moment, because something has just crossed the invisible line between silence and truth. There is a message that has been waiting, not inside a phone, not inside a letter, but inside a decision someone has been afraid to make. Before another hour passes, before another excuse is created, before another chance quietly slips into yesterday. There is something you deserve to hear. Stay a little longer, because what begins as a whisper may become the turning point you never expected. There is someone whose heart has been standing at the edge of a choice for far longer than anyone realizes. On the outside, they appear calm. They continue with routines. They smile when necessary. They answer questions with ordinary words. Yet behind every ordinary moment, another conversation keeps repeating inside them. A conversation about you. A conversation they have tried to silence more than once. Imagine holding a letter in your hands for weeks, reading it over and over, but never finding the courage to send it. That is what their emotions have become. Every day they promise themselves they will let go. Every night they discover they cannot. Something always pulls them back to the same place, the same memory, the same unfinished feeling. But this is where everything changes. The title of this story is not about fear. It is about timing. Please open this, before I make the biggest mistake of my life. Those words are not an ending. They are the sound of someone reaching the limit of pretending they no longer care. Have you ever wondered why certain people suddenly become unusually quiet? Why they stop explaining themselves? Why they disappear for a while, only to return carrying a completely different energy? Sometimes silence is not distance. Sometimes silence is preparation. And sometimes, silence is the final test before honesty arrives. Stay with this moment. Because the next realization connects every unanswered question you have carried. Your soulmate has reached a point where every future they imagine somehow leads back to one missing piece. They have tried replacing it with work, distractions, ambitions, conversations, even new environments. Yet every road eventually circles back to the same thought. What if I walk away from the one thing my heart never truly left? That question has become impossible for them to ignore. Notice something remarkable. The strongest moments in life rarely announce themselves with loud celebrations. Instead, they begin quietly. A single realization. A single pause. A single decision that changes everything afterward. This story begins inside one of those pauses. Right now, your soulmate is looking at their own future differently than they did before. The plans that once felt certain suddenly seem incomplete. The direction they believed was fixed now feels uncertain. Not because they are weak, but because clarity often arrives after confusion has exhausted every other option. Here is something few people understand. When someone finally accepts what their heart has been trying to tell them, they stop running from difficult conversations. They begin moving toward them. That shift has already started. You may not see it today. You may not hear it immediately. But invisible decisions are often made long before visible actions appear. What if this quiet transformation has already begun? What if, at this very moment, they are rewriting the future they thought they wanted because something inside refuses to settle for regret? Think carefully. Regret rarely appears overnight. It grows one ignored feeling at a time. One postponed conversation. One hidden truth. One opportunity left unopened. Your soulmate has begun recognizing that pattern, and it has unsettled them more than they expected. For the first time in a long while, they are asking themselves questions they once avoided. What if waiting any longer becomes the mistake I remember forever? What if the courage I need is only one decision away? Those questions are changing everything. Don't rush past this point. The smallest realization often carries the greatest consequence. The energy surrounding this connection feels different now because hesitation is slowly giving way to awareness. Every memory that once seemed ordinary now carries unexpected meaning. Every coincidence feels less accidental. Every familiar feeling returns with greater intensity than before. And perhaps the most surprising part: your soulmate no longer wants another perfect excuse. They want one honest beginning. That is why this message exists. Not to predict the future. Not to promise impossible outcomes. But to remind you that the biggest turning points usually begin when someone finally decides they cannot keep living as if the truth does not matter. Stay until the next chapter, because what they are about to realize next will reveal why opening this message before their next decision could change everything in ways neither of you expected. A quiet shift is happening, and if you listen closely, you will notice that this story is no longer about unanswered questions. It is about the moment when hesitation begins losing its grip. Stay with me a little longer, because the next few moments reveal why your soulmate feels as though time itself is asking them to make a choice they can no longer postpone. There comes a point in every meaningful connection when pretending becomes more exhausting than telling the truth. Your soulmate has arrived at that point. They have replayed countless possibilities inside their mind. Every scenario ends the same way, with one thought they cannot escape. What if I keep waiting until the opportunity quietly disappears? That single question has become louder than every fear that once held them back. Notice how life often works. The answers we search for rarely arrive in dramatic ways. Instead, they appear through ordinary moments that suddenly feel extraordinary. A familiar place begins reminding them of you. A simple conversation unexpectedly echoes something you once shared. A quiet evening becomes impossible to enjoy because their thoughts refuse to settle anywhere except on what remains unfinished. These are not interruptions. They are awakenings. And your soulmate is beginning to understand that some feelings return because they still have something important to say. Pause here for a second. Imagine standing in front of two roads. One feels comfortable because it asks nothing new. The other feels uncertain because it requires honesty. Most people choose comfort. But your soulmate has started realizing that comfort without truth eventually becomes another form of regret. That realization has changed the direction of their thoughts. Instead of asking, "How do I move on?" they are asking, "What if moving forward actually means facing what I left behind?" That difference changes everything. Every passing day has quietly strengthened something inside them. Not urgency. Not panic. Something much deeper. Clarity. Clarity has a remarkable way of removing excuses one by one. The reasons they once believed were impossible now seem smaller. The fears that once looked overwhelming now appear temporary. The walls they carefully built are beginning to look like doors waiting to be opened. And that is why this message feels so important. Please open this. Before I make the biggest mistake of my life. Those words now carry a different meaning. The biggest mistake is not making the wrong choice. It is allowing fear to make every choice for you. Your soulmate finally understands that. For the first time in a long while, they are imagining a future based on possibility instead of uncertainty. They are beginning to believe that some conversations are worth having, even when the outcome cannot be predicted. Because some risks protect the heart. Others protect the truth. And the truth is becoming impossible for them to ignore. If this story has spoken to something deep inside you, I would love to know what part resonated most. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoy journeys like this, subscribing simply means we get to continue exploring them together. Now listen carefully. There is another layer to all of this. Every meaningful decision creates a quiet ripple before anyone else notices it. Your soulmate has already created that ripple. Perhaps they have started paying closer attention to the small details they once overlooked. Perhaps they have begun remembering conversations they thought were insignificant. Perhaps they are finally seeing the connection from a completely different perspective. Whatever the reason, something inside them refuses to return to the way things were. That is not coincidence. That is growth. Growth rarely announces itself with noise. It whispers. It waits. Then, almost without warning, it changes the direction of an entire future. And your soulmate is standing at that exact moment. One more realization remains hidden behind the next chapter. When it finally comes into the light, you will understand why this message could not remain unopened any longer. And why the decision they are preparing to make may become the moment they remember for years to come. A single moment can quietly outweigh an entire year, and that moment may be closer than either of you realizes. Before this story moves any further, hold on to one thought: the greatest changes are rarely announced with certainty. They begin with one brave decision that almost never feels comfortable. Stay until the final sentence of this chapter, because another hidden piece is about to fall into place. Your soulmate has reached an unusual crossroads. Not because life forced them there. Because their own heart finally stopped accepting easy answers. For so long, they believed there would always be another day. Another opportunity. Another perfect moment to explain everything left unsaid. But something unexpected happened. They started imagining what life would feel like years from now if they never spoke honestly. That picture changed everything. It wasn't filled with dramatic events. It was filled with ordinary days carrying one extraordinary question. What if I had simply been brave enough? Sometimes that single question becomes stronger than every excuse combined. That is exactly where your soulmate finds themselves now. Notice the difference. Before, they searched for reasons to wait. Now, they search for reasons to begin. That shift is small on the surface, yet enormous beneath it. Because once someone's direction changes internally, the outer world slowly begins changing with it. The conversations they avoided no longer seem impossible. The distance they accepted no longer feels permanent. Even their definition of the future has quietly transformed. Instead of asking whether something could work, they are wondering what could happen if they never gave it the chance. Think about that for a moment. Life has a curious way of returning us to unfinished chapters. Not to punish us, not to confuse us, but to offer one more opportunity to respond differently than before. Your soulmate is beginning to recognize that this connection was never about perfect timing. It was about becoming the kind of person who no longer lets fear write the ending. Every experience they have lived through has slowly prepared them for this realization. Every delay taught patience. Every disappointment revealed what truly mattered. Every unanswered moment sharpened their understanding of what they genuinely value. And somehow, every road keeps leading back to one familiar thought. You. Not because the past can be repeated, but because the future still feels unwritten. There is something powerful about an unwritten future. It carries possibility. It invites courage. It reminds us that tomorrow is shaped by today's choices. That is why this message feels so urgent without needing to raise its voice. Please open this, before I make the biggest mistake of my life. Those words are no longer about fear of losing something. They are about refusing to lose another chance to be honest. Imagine standing at sunrise after a very long night. The landscape has not completely changed, but the light allows you to see it differently. That is what clarity has done for your soulmate. The circumstances may look familiar, yet their perspective has become entirely new. And when perspective changes, everything that follows begins changing too. Perhaps they are already preparing for a conversation they once believed would never happen. Perhaps they are quietly gathering the confidence that has taken months, or even years, to build. Or perhaps they are simply waiting for the one moment when courage becomes stronger than hesitation. Whatever the next step looks like, one truth remains. No meaningful journey moves forward without someone choosing honesty over uncertainty. That choice is closer than ever. Before this story continues, remember this. Some messages arrive exactly when they are needed. Some decisions reshape an entire future. And some moments become unforgettable because someone finally decides they would rather live with courage than wonder forever. The next chapter will reveal what happens after that decision begins to take shape, because the message has finally been opened, and nothing inside either heart will remain exactly the same again. A quiet realization has become impossible to ignore, and from this moment forward, the story is no longer about wondering what might happen. It is about what begins changing the instant the message is finally opened. Stay close until the very end of this chapter, because what follows is not loud or dramatic, it is something far more powerful. It is the moment truth begins replacing uncertainty. The words are simple. Not perfect. Not rehearsed. Just honest. For the first time in a very long while, your soulmate stops trying to find the right sentence and instead chooses the real one. That is where everything starts shifting. People often believe life changes through extraordinary events. But more often, it changes because someone decides to stop hiding behind fear. Your soulmate has discovered that carrying unspoken feelings is heavier than facing an uncertain answer. That discovery has quietly transformed them. The person who once hesitated now finds themselves looking ahead instead of looking away. The person who once delayed every important step now feels an unfamiliar sense of peace. Why? Because honesty has a remarkable way of lifting the weight that silence can never remove. Imagine watching the first light appear across the horizon. The world does not change in a single second. It changes little by little. Until suddenly you realize the darkness has already disappeared. That is exactly what is happening within this connection. There is no rush. There is no pressure. Only a growing awareness that some opportunities deserve to be met with courage instead of hesitation. Your soulmate understands something today that they could not fully understand before. Every meaningful connection deserves clarity. Not endless guessing. Not endless waiting. Clarity. That understanding has become their quiet strength. Even if the path ahead still contains unknowns, they no longer want unanswered questions to decide their future. Instead, they want sincerity to guide the next step. And perhaps that is the greatest change of all. Not that every answer suddenly appears. But that fear no longer controls the conversation. Take a moment and think about your own journey. How many turning points began with one small decision? One conversation. One message. One choice to trust what felt true. Sometimes we spend months preparing for a single moment, only to realize that one moment quietly reshapes everything that comes after it. That is where this story now stands. If this journey has stayed with you until now, thank you for sharing these moments together. If it has encouraged you or made you reflect, consider sharing your thoughts below, and if you'd like to continue these stories in future videos, subscribing is a simple way to stay connected. Now listen carefully. The message has been opened. The silence has been broken. The future is no longer being written by assumptions. It is beginning to be shaped by intention. No one can predict every chapter that follows. But one thing has become clear. The biggest mistake was never speaking from the heart. The biggest mistake would have been never trying at all. And your soulmate has chosen a different path. A path where courage speaks before regret has the chance to. A path where possibility is stronger than fear. A path where tomorrow is no longer limited by yesterday's hesitation. As this chapter comes to a close, remember one final thought. Some people enter our lives to teach us lessons. Some inspire us to grow. And some quietly remind us that the bravest decision is often the simplest one, to be genuine. The next chapter will reveal how that single choice begins creating unexpected moments that neither of you could have imagined, proving that sometimes the smallest step toward truth opens the door to the brightest new beginning. There is one final piece of this chapter that has remained hidden, not because it was impossible to see, but because it could only be understood after everything else had settled into place. Stay with this moment, because what happens next is quieter than excitement, yet far more lasting. It is the calm that arrives when someone finally stops running from what matters most. Your soulmate has begun to notice something unexpected. The future they once imagined without certainty no longer feels complete. Not because their dreams have become smaller. Because their understanding has become deeper. For the longest time, they believed the answer was somewhere outside themselves, in perfect timing, perfect circumstances, or perfect confidence. Now they realize that none of those things were ever the missing piece. The missing piece was the courage to be authentic. That realization has changed the way they see every memory. Moments that once seemed ordinary now carry unexpected meaning. Conversations they almost forgot suddenly feel important. Small acts of kindness have become reminders that genuine connections are built one sincere moment at a time. And through all of those reflections, one thought continues returning. Not with urgency. Not with confusion. But with quiet certainty. There is still something worth saying. That thought refuses to disappear. Sometimes life gives us many chances without announcing them. Sometimes the opportunity we have been waiting for has already been placed in front of us. We simply recognize it later than expected. Your soulmate understands this now. Instead of asking whether everything will be perfect, they have started asking a far better question. What kind of future do I want to look back on? A future filled with endless what-ifs. Or a future built on honest effort, sincere words, and the peace of knowing they stayed true to themselves? The answer has become clearer every day. And clarity creates momentum. Once someone stops carrying the weight of constant hesitation, they begin moving with confidence that cannot be borrowed from anyone else. That confidence is growing. Not all at once. But steadily.